The biggest dilemma facing Western Europe at the moment is the prospect of Donald Trump in the White House again, and what that means for NATO and European defence, particularly against Russia. The leader of the German centre-right party, Manfred Weber, has now called for Europe to develop its own independent nuclear deterrent. Britain and France have nuclear weapons, but it seems that Europe generally, and perhaps Germany in particular, now want to join in. Mr. Weber said, Europe must build deterrence. We must be able to deter and defend ourselves. We all know that when push comes to shove, the nuclear option is the really decisive one. To give us the perspective from across the Channel is General Dominique Triquand, the former head of the French military mission to NATO and to the United Nations. General, thank you so much for talking to LBC tonight. Can I ask you, first of all, for your reaction to what Mr. Weber has said? Do you also think that Europe is going to have its own independent nuclear deterrent?
I think that coming from a German authority, it will be very difficult for Germany to have that. You know, how is the sense of anti-nuclear in Germany? On the contrary, what I can say is that President Macron have already said that the French nuclear deterrents have a European interest, meaning that it could be interesting for European. That was an open discussion, but in fact nobody was discussing really that. We've got this problem of nuclear deterrence, but we've got the problem of defense generally, classic defense, if I may say. So I think on the nuclear side, they should discuss with countries who have already nuclear deterrence, like UK or France, which is part of EU, and have a proposal on the table and discuss the rest of the defense policy.
General Triquand, there has been a very, very long European tradition of, as it were, relying on the Americans for defence. We don't spend, generally across the continent, nearly as much on defence in proportion as the Americans have done, and some countries have an almost sort of pacifist attitude. Do you think Europe is ready to take a much harder-edged and more aggressive view of the need for defence?
Certainly, European countries are taking several, they've increased their budget, they have increased their equipment, but this is happening inside NATO. But we must remember that NATO is made of course, US, major partner, but all European countries. And that means that when you are increasing your defense budget and defense policy within NATO, you are indirectly increasing the European capacity to defend itself.
And do you think, I know President Macron has talked about this, there is any prospect of effectively a European army? Because that requires a certain ceding of sovereignty to the European centre, which a lot of European countries would find extremely difficult.
No, I think no, we never talk about a European army. We talk about defense of Europe or European defense, which is slightly different, meaning that European army must cooperate and be able to work together, what they are doing during the exercise in NATO currently. So it's very different than a European army. And very often when you put these words, European army, everybody's stopping. Specifically in UK, I think, but elsewhere in Europe, say we don't want a European army, but we want defense of Europe with European defence.
And in this country, there's been a lot of discussion about where Britain's relations with the EU will go next. And some people say that it is in the area of security and defence that there can be some kind of rapprochement between Grand Britannia and the EU. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yes, I agree. And there is a specific agreement between UK and France, a Lancaster Agreement, which will push forward cooperation between the two countries. We can, within NATO, we can extend that. And that is certainly, I mean, defense of Europe, it includes UK, of course. UK is not part of EU, but it's part of Europe. And we need to cooperate and to try to specifically to work together, specifically with Ukraine, where UK has been involved for a very long time in Ukraine.
General Triquand, thank you very much indeed for talking to me tonight. Really interesting.